What's up, guys? Today I'm joined by a very special guest. You already know it's Jessie Naylor. I haven't had Jesse on the channel for a while, but I thought it would be a good time to have him back on the channel. How you doing today, Jesse?
I'm doing fantastic. I always like coming on here because you're always going to throw some random topics my way. And usually you will let me know right before the show what those topics are. But tonight I said, surprise me. Don't give me any of the topics. I want to know, or I don't want to know what the topics are. And I just want to be caught off guard and by surprise even more. So let's get it cracking.
Let's jump right into it. Before we obviously you saw the title of this video. Before we talk about what the title of this video is, if you haven't heard already, obviously Adam Schefter, any internet reported that Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt in that Cowboys game, but now he's expected to have shoulder surgery that will sideline him for 16 weeks, and he probably won't be able to throw the football until maybe summer, sometime June, end of June, July. But what is your thoughts on this news, and how does this affect Jimmy Garoppolo's trade value?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The timing of this is extremely interesting because I feel like his team's involved in some sort of way. I don't know to what extent. I don't know if they're trying to sabotage things, but let's not forget that Jimmy G, his no trade clause ends going into the next league year, which means they don't have any control as to where he goes. Now, it's assumed that the 49ers will do right by him, but the fact that he all of a sudden needs surgery and is not going to be able to throw a ball for 16 weeks, when we did expect a thumb surgery to come, that was going to be a 6 to 8 week heal time. Now we have a shoulder surgery, 16 weeks. That puts him up to training camp, basically. That's if he
Yep.
gets his surgery in the next couple of weeks. So if that's the case, then what is this going to do to his trade value? Again, I don't think he was worth a lot, anyways. I have a feeling that maybe his team is trying to angle into him getting cut so that he can just choose the team that he wants to go to. But I will say this, if teams were interested, I'm not saying that they're going to shy away completely, but they certainly aren't going to be willing to give up a lot of draft capital to get this guy who they're already going to have to pay. They're going to have to restructure. They're going to have to extend. They're going to have to give something up. And now he's injured. We already know he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. What is surgery going to do to that arm strength? If anything, it may not do anything, but there's a lot of question marks. There's guys like Mitchell Trubisky out there that you can have for half the money, none of the assets spent, not coming off of a surgery, younger, less risk. I would go after a guy like that before I'd go after Jimmy G. I would do the same thing for Mariota, same thing for Wentz, same thing for Gardner Minshew. That would be my path if I'm one of these teams. But if one of these teams wants to give up something for Jimmy, 49ers got to take it and run at this point.
Yep. I mean, this was definitely a shock, right? Because we never knew any. Obviously, we knew about the thumb injury. He was expected to have, thumb surgery. But then when this report, I was like, wait, shoulder? Like, was this a typo or like what was like shoulder
Right.
surgery? But obviously, this year the Niners quarterback is expected to be Trey Lance, and obviously, I don't believe the reports of the Brady coming to San Francisco or Rodgers coming to the Bay. I really don't think that's gonna happen. But the Niners obviously aren't wanting to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, but teams like with this injury, teams are a little bit less interested on trading for Jimmy Garoppolo because of this injury, because he's not going to be ready probably until training camp, like you said. But Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not the best thrower of the football in general. What's going to happen his after his surgery, right? Especially on his throwing shoulder, and we've seen times where quarterbacks have had shoulder surgery and they just haven't been the same, right? For example, one example that comes to mind is when Cam Newton, after that Super Bowl,
Mhm.
he had shoulder surgery, and then that season that he came back, I think it was like 2019 or 2018, and he was just he just couldn't hit anything. Like he was missing majority of his passes. He just wasn't the same Cam Newton that we were used to seeing. He wasn't the same MVP Cam Newton. But teams are definitely gonna be less interested, and this definitely is gonna affect his trade value because obviously Schefter and those guys, even they still said teams are still interested in trading for Jimmy Garoppolo. But why would teams still be necessarily as interested when you hear this news? Because shoulder surgery is like a pitcher, right? Like when pitchers have shoulder surgery, are they gonna be the same? Are they gonna come back better? Are they gonna come back the same? And I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo will come back 100% or what's gonna happen with his arm? What's gonna happen? Can he throw the football as well? So there's a lot of question marks for me. So like you said, like if I am an owner of a team or I am a general manager, I'm looking for a quarterback, I would definitely target a guy like a Mitchell Trubisky. He's younger. I think he has a better arm. Doesn't have that many injuries. Obviously, Mariota, Minshew. There's a lot of guys, but after hearing this news, a lot of teams have, I feel like, have definitely lost a lot of interest for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's just so many other options that are out there and available that just aren't going to cost you as much. Like it to me, it doesn't make any sense. But
Mm-hmm.
there is the one team that I keep going back to is Washington. I think that's the one team that makes the most amount of sense. Maybe you get a third and a fifth. Maybe you get a fourth that could escalate to a second, depending on whatever you want to put into that contract, whether it's games played, stats, whatever. But to me, like that's the one team right now that makes the most sense. Even the Steelers, who I still think make some sense, Trubisky really looks like that's where he should land at this point. And that's what I would expect to happen.
Yep, and what 20 something million dollars for a quarterback coming off of shoulder surgery? Like, is that worth it for any team? No. And then also, if a team does trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, he's off his contract after this year. So are you
Right.
gonna repay? Are you gonna re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo? And if a team is willing to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, you're gonna have to give up some sort of assets. Is it worth giving up assets for Jimmy Garoppolo? And if he's less, who knows if he's gonna be if he's gonna play well next year coming off that injury. But who knows if you're gonna be able to even if you're gonna re-sign him after that year because of his shoulder injury. Who knows if he's gonna come back, how well he's gonna come back, and how strong he's gonna come back. But well, moving on to the next topic. If you haven't heard this already, Rob Ninkovich, and it was Get Up in the Morning, Get Up, obviously ESPN show, and Rob Ninkovich and Dan Orlovsky. There was a segment about Carson Wentz and should the Colts get rid of Carson Wentz. There's a time to move on from Carson Wentz. And Rob Ninkovich said, I think the Colts need a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. And he started making an argument about why the Colts should go after Jimmy Garoppolo. And he said Jimmy Garoppolo's a better passer. Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously, he started saying Carson Wentz is injury prone. And he started going off and saying a bunch of things. But what are your thoughts on his comments? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Just okay. All right. So let me get this straight. His two main reasons to move off of Carson Wentz: injuries. Jimmy Garoppolo checks that box.
Yep.
The other reason is he felt like they needed a quarterback that could push the ball down the field accurately. That's not Jimmy G. So the
No.
fact that he's even suggesting Jimmy G, by the way, if everything is even, I have to pay them the same. I have to sign them for the same amount of years. All of that. I'm taking Carson Wentz straight up. Give me
Yep.
Carson Wentz over Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm taking him because at the very least, I know he can get mobile. I know that he can make throws that Jimmy can't make. They're both loofs mentally. They both can be injured. They both have mental lapses. But for me, I'm taking my chances on a Carson Wentz if all things are even. And I just do not understand getting rid of Carson Wentz for Jimmy Garoppolo. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I am absolutely not doing that. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Now, if you wanted to make a case for Jimmy Garoppolo, that was not how you do it, right?
Mm.
You talk about week 18 would be a great example.
Yep.
Well,
Exactly.
listen,
Yep. Exactly what I was
right.
thinking about when I heard that. Right. Week 18,
Yep,
he beat the Jaguars. And Jimmy Garoppolo's able to
exactly.
beat the Jaguars, right? And Carson Wentz
Exactly.
wasn't. Exactly. That's the argument that you should make, Rob Ninkovich.
Right,
But
right.
his argument was flawed, right? Because if he's talking, the biggest point that I was like, all right, this is a dumb argument, was when he talked about injuries. Because like, you can make a case that Jimmy Garoppolo is more injury prone than Carson Wentz. Like outside of that injury that he had in 2017, obviously that he was playing like an MVP caliber that year. He was playing like an MVP candidate that year, and he was an MVP candidate that year, and he got hurt. And then outside of that, obviously he misses some playoff. He missed that playoff game when he got hurt, when he got that hit by Jadeveon Clowney. But Jimmy Garoppolo, you could argue, is more injury prone. This year, obviously, he was injured. He had that thumb injury. Now he's having shoulder surgery. You look at last year, obviously, with his ankle injury, with his sprained ankle, and he missed like 8 weeks. Jimmy Garoppolo is more injury prone than Carson Wentz. So I don't understand what he was saying by that argument. Like Jimmy Garoppolo is more injury prone. Now, one other case that you could also make is that Jimmy Garoppolo wins football games, but at the same time, I don't believe that I don't believe that wins are a QB stat. But that's also another argument that he could have made. But the biggest argument, if you wanted to make a good case, was like you said to say, yo, Jimmy Garoppolo beat the Jaguars. Carson Wentz couldn't do that. Carson Wentz did that one time, but when it mattered, he couldn't do that, right? And Jimmy Garoppolo blew the brakes off the Jaguars, and he had a great game against the Jaguars. So if I was Rob Ninkovich, I would make that argument instead of saying Jimmy Garoppolo and Carson Wentz is injury prone. And also another thing that he said Carson Wentz holds them back. Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't, or something like that. He said something about Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't hold the Colts back, and I'm like, Jimmy Garoppolo holds the Niners back. Like, why?
Talk about.
What makes the difference of him being on the Colts and the Niners? He holds one team back. He wouldn't elevate the other team in any other way.
No, I agree. I think it was asinine the way that he put that. Definitely not a way to make an argument. I mean, the youth, not by much, but the youth is on Carson Wentz's side. The arm strength and the abilities to make specific throws is on Carson Wentz's side. The mobility is on Carson Wentz's side. Hell, when we saw these guys on the field together, Carson Wentz was the better quarterback. And if you look at their stats, Carson Wentz was more efficient. So to me, I don't get this at all. But listen, if the Colts want to do it, let them make that mistake.
Yep.
They made the
Exactly.
mistake once. Go ahead and do it again.
Yep.
I'm all for it for sure.
Yep. Hey, if you want to take Jimmy Garoppolo off our hands, yes, I would definitely. I wouldn't mind, right? Like I wouldn't mind as much as if I was the Colts, I wouldn't do it, right?
Not a chance.
If I was the general manager of the Colts, I wouldn't do it. But if you want to take Jimmy Garoppolo off our hands for what, a third or a fourth or a fifth, even, go ahead. I'll let you have him.
By all
Well,
means, please.
yeah. Well, speaking of Carson Wentz, should the Colts move on from Carson Wentz? Do you think they should?
To me, if you're going to move on from Carson Wentz, you have to have a better solution. So when I looked at the Colts, I said, to me, they were a dark horse for Aaron Rodgers, right? The problem is they don't have they don't have the capital to get it done. That's the problem. If you're going to move on from Wentz, you need to bring in a superstar quarterback. Those guys just aren't out there. So I'm not moving on from Carson Wentz. I mean, if I move on from Carson Wentz, then what am I bringing in a Trubisky? Am I bringing in a Jimmy Garoppolo? Like I'm bringing in guys that at the best are at his skill level. To me, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Like they're basically all the same guy, right? And I would argue that again, I just did that Carson Wentz is better than Jimmy Garoppolo. So for me, no, I'm not doing it. You gave up way too much. I think Wentz is fine. Like I don't, can he win a Super Bowl? Can he be that MVP caliber quarterback ever again? Probably not. But can he get you to the playoffs and can you win with him? Absolutely. Especially in that division where there is no strong quarterback play. I think Wentz is fine. You can win that division with Wentz. I would keep Wentz.
I would keep Wentz unless I could get a guy like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, right? Like Rodgers, I don't
Right.
think it's right but Russ maybe, but I don't. I also don't think that's likely either. But unless there's a better option that you would say 100% he's better than Carson Wentz and he's available, no, you don't move on from Carson Wentz. Now, do I think Carson Wentz should be the long-term quarterback for the Colts? No, because the way I look at it is, yes, you can win that division with Carson Wentz, but look at the quarterbacks in the AFC. Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. There's a bunch of great quarterbacks in the AFC, right? Now, if the Colts made it to the playoffs this year and they had to face, Joe Burrow and the Bengals or the Josh Allen the Bills, would they be able to beat Bills? Would Carson Wentz be able to go toe to toe and go head to head against Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes? No, he can't, right? But if I'm the Colts, unless there's a better, 100% a better option that's available, no, you don't move on from Carson Wentz. But at the same time, I don't think you'll be able to win a Super Bowl, Carson Wentz, especially with the quarterbacks in that division. No.
Well, here's the other thing though, too, that I look at. Chances are he can't go toe to toe with those guys. But I would put my money on him to go toe to toe with those guys before I would Jimmy Garoppolo. Like I've at least seen Carson Wentz make some incredible throws, like top notch QB throws. You go back and you watch that Arizona game where Quentin Nelson was injured. That whole team was basically injured. he willed them to victory on his right arm. He made 4 throws that were like, "Oh my gosh." Like, not many guys in the league can make this type of throw. He does have that in him from time to time. Jimmy, even at his best, could never even dream of making throws like that.
No.
So, when I look at a guy that could possibly catch fire for a game or a half and go toe to toe, yes, Carson Wentz could. Is it likely? No, but it's impossible for Jimmy Garoppolo to do so. So
No.
yeah, I'm keeping Carson Wentz if that is the other option.
Yeah, there's no way in hell Jimmy Garoppolo could go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. No way. Especially, let's say if Trent Williams is injured or he has some of his guys missing or Elijah Mitchell
No
gets hurt.
way. No
No
way.
way in hell. Jimmy Garoppolo, there's no way. It's impossible. Like, no. Moving on to the next topic. Now, this is a little bit of a controversial topic. Most people have been talking about it, so trending a little bit on Twitter. But should the 49ers trade George Kittle?
No, not right now. But I don't think he's untradeable. Like I think people get emotionally attached to certain players. Obviously, Kittle is a fan favorite, but I don't think he's untouchable. Like the way that people are making it look or making it sound, oh, this guy, you can never. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Every player is tradable. We've seen it across the league for many years. Not a single player is untouchable. That being said, you have to look at the ramifications. Right now, if you trade him, you're not going to get the value because the cap hit is going to be so big. If you wait until after June 1st, however, that cap hit becomes reasonable. The problem is unless you trade him for a player, you are trading him for future assets, which I do not like when you have a second year quarterback coming in. You need all the weapons around him that you can get. And let's see how this thing shakes out. Now, if Kittle can stay healthy, would I explore a trade next offseason where the money becomes less? Absolutely. Is it likely they trade him? No. Would I trade him now? No. But is it impossible and should he be off limits? Absolutely not.
No, the Niners shouldn't trade George Kittle. They just shouldn't. And that's simple and plain, they should not. Now, the reason I'm saying no is because we've seen George Kittle come off a lot of injured seasons, but I don't think you'll be able to get a similar caliber player that George Kittle is if you're proposing a trade or someone's offering your trade. Like a guy like you're not gonna get a guy like George Kittle if you're trading. Like I don't think you can get an Xavier Howard for George Kittle. I don't think you can get an
Maybe.
elite guy for George Kittle. Now, I wouldn't do it for assets because we've seen when the Niners have traded, especially for like a first round draft pick, we've seen the Niners aren't great at drafting first round draft picks. Like we saw with Defoe, right? You traded DeForest Buckner, you drafted Kinlaw. And what has Kinlaw done for you? Nothing. Kinlaw hasn't done much for you. You could say pretty much he hasn't done nothing. He's been injured. He hasn't been as good as DeForest Buckner. I didn't expect him to be as good as DeForest Buckner, but he hasn't even been available, right? And I've said this before on my show. The best ability is availability, and
Mm.
Kinlaw hasn't been available. Now, if you trade George Kittle for assets, who knows if those assets, like a first round draft pick, who knows if that first round draft pick will pay off and he's actually going to be a superstar like George Kittle. And George Kittle, as much as he's missed games, George Kittle is still considered in most people's eyes the best tight end in football. You're not even if you trade for a draft pick, right? You're not gonna get a best tight end in football or whatever position you draft. You're not gonna get a caliber player that George Kittle is, and even with the Xavier Howard, right? Now Xavier Howard is a superstar, but I wouldn't say Xavier Howard is the best cornerback in football. I wouldn't even say Miami Dolphins fans wouldn't even say Xavier Howard is the best cornerback in football. No, you
No.
would come here like you look at the list: Jalen Ramsey, you look at Jay Alexander, you look at Marlon Humphrey. There's a bunch of guys that I would say or that I would take over Xavier Howard.
Tre'Davious White.
Tre'Davious White. There's a bunch of guys, right? Right. On the other hand, now the only argument that I would make, the only other guy that I would say is comparatively close to George Kittle, and that some people even say that it's better than George Kittle is Travis Kelsey, right? But outside of that, who would you say is a better tight end than George Kittle? Who does as much as George Kittle?
Yeah, I think Mark Andrews is closing that gap a little bit, but right now I'd still take Kittle.
Yep. Mark Andrews is good though. Mark Andrews, he had a great year. And even for Trey Lance next year, right? your tight end is basically your safety blanket, right? And we already seen this year in that Texans game, like George Kittle, Trey Lance had one pass that always comes to mind where he hit him at midfield, and George Kittle had that one-handed grab. Like Trey Lance is always better to have more weapons, and it definitely would be a benefit to have George Kittle on that team, right? Especially for Trey Lance.
1000%.
Have
Yes.
Debo, have Ayuk, have Kittle. The more weapons, the better, right? Any quarterback, right? For any quarterback, the more weapons you have, the better, right? Because the better weapons you have, the better receivers that you have to throw the football to. But I would say no to trading Kittle. Just that's just me personally because I feel like Kittle is the best tight end in football. I don't think if you're trading him for assets, it's just too much of a risk for me because. And I remember talking about this like this off season, like last off season. I remember talking about this. I remember one time I think it was like me and Swanson. We were talking on Discord, and we were talking about if George Kittle misses like 8 games this year, would you trade George Kittle for 2 first-round draft picks? And we kept going a little bit back and forth on this like debate. I'm like, no, because you could trade for 2 first-round draft picks, but what if you get a Jamarcus Russell with one of your first-round draft picks, and you get to go arbitrary with your 2 first-round draft picks, and Kittle goes out and dominates on another team? So I personally said no, but unless you're trading Kittle for a player like an Xavier Howard possibly, I'm just gonna say no. I wouldn't do it.
Okay, that's fair. Bay Area baller is on the Kyle Fuller bandwagon. You're welcome. No, I've been talking about Fuller for a while. He makes a lot of sense. He really does. Like again, he's that veteran piece that can push for a starting position. He plays full seasons every year he's been in the league. Kyle Fuller makes a ton of sense for the
Yep.
49ers right now.
Yep. And Kyle Fuller is one of those guys the Niners even have a chance to bring in because the Niners necessarily don't even value the quarterback position as much. But the Niners aren't big spenders in free agency. Like, when was the last time you saw them going out and giving $100 million to some free agent, right? Like, they don't shell out big
Yeah,
money in
they're
free agency. They don't go after big star players like Devontae Adams or OBJ or big star players. They don't go after that. They don't spend a lot of money in free agency. And if you look at the Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch regime, most free agency, most off seasons, outside of one exception, which would be I think it was the 2018 off season where they brought in D4 and they brought out Quan Alexander. They brought in Quan Alexander, but even D4 they traded for D4, and I think they traded for Quan Alexander, if I'm not mistaken. But outside of that, we've seen that the Niners, what they usually do in free agency, they just bring back their old players, whether that might be guys that they've been on the roster, undrafted guys. They usually re-sign a lot of their players. They don't shell out big money. So if there's one guy that they have a chance at, it's Kyle Fuller. They're not gonna get, they don't have I don't think they're gonna be able to get a Stephon Gilmore or not Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson. Like I don't think they're gonna shell out and pay J.C. Jackson more money than the Patriots are. And the Patriots are likely to franchise tag J.C. Jackson. But if there's one guy the Niners have a possible chance at signing, it's Kyle Fuller. And even another guy that I wouldn't mind the Niners signing is Casey Hayward. I thought Casey Hayward was pretty solid this year. And Casey Hayward's been pretty good, and I wouldn't mind him. I think he would be a great addition to this roster because obviously with the guys that we have on this team with Ambry Thomas and Deontay Lenore, he's played in the league. He's a veteran. He would bring that leadership to the locker room, and obviously he would have a chance at the starting job. So also another guy that I wouldn't mind bringing in if I was the Niners would be Casey Hayward.
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad at Hayward. He's a little long in the tooth, but I wouldn't be super mad at it.
Yep. Well, this is just sad news. This is just straight up sad news. How big of a loss is Bobby Turner for the 49ers? I mean, we saw what happened with Elijah Mitchell this year, and who is Elijah Mitchell's coach? It was Bobby Turner, right? Obviously, Kyle Shanahan is the head coach of the team, but who is his running backs coach? It was Bobby Turner, and Bobby Turner, what he's done with guys like Mostert, with guys like Elijah Mitchell, is pretty impressive. And I would say outside of Chris Kosaric, Bobby Turner was the best position coach on the 49ers, and he's most likely expected not to return to the team this year. But how big of a loss is Bobby Turner for the 49ers?
Yeah, I think it's could potentially be a big loss. I agree. It was him and Kasarik. Like those are the guys that you kept saying, as long as you don't lose them as position coaches, you're in a good place, right? McDaniel leaves, you're fine. But it actually makes a lot of sense. You know, they did bring in Anthony Lynn. They did so before there was anything official about McDaniel leaving. We thought it was to replace McDaniel. In reality, it was to replace Turner and also making him the assistant head coach. So I'm okay with it because Lynn I think is very good. He'll bring in something different. I think Turner might have some health issues. That's why he's stepping away. But it certainly is a loss. Like Turner is a hell of a coach. He has been for quite some time. And, you know, I don't know what that drop off is going to be, but it could potentially be huge. Thank God for Anthony Lynn. Like that's
Yeah.
all I'll say about that.
Yep. We have Anthony Lynn, right? Obviously, it's still a loss, but I mean, Bobby Turner, if you look at his age, he's like what, 70 plus years old, 71, 72
Yeah, like
years old.
71. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
so
up
he's
there.
old, right? He's up there, right? He's like Lovie Smith old, even probably older than Lovie Smith. Like he's old, but I mean, it's kind of expected he was either gonna, leave the team this year, or maybe even next year, because at his age, right, it's hard to be out there. What position? I think position coaches work what, like 14 hours each day. So for a 70 year
They
old,
put in a lot of work.
yeah,
Yes.
they put in a lot of work for a 70-year-old. That's pretty impressive, right? Being 70 years old and working 14 hours a day, but I mean, like you said, good luck. I'm glad that we have Anthony Lynn on this team, because now we have Anthony Lynn. Obviously, it could be a huge loss, but Anthony Lynn was a running back coach, so it's not like, all right, we're bringing in a new face that hasn't coached running backs before. But thank God for Anthony Lynn, because if we didn't have him on the team, it would definitely be more. It would definitely be more worrying for me personally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No Anthony Lynn, I'd be freaking out right now.
Yep. Well, we obviously know we talked about Carson Wentz. We talked about Jimmy Garoppolo. But speaking of Baker Mayfield, should the Browns give Baker Mayfield the bag?
Hell no. No, absolutely do not do it. This man, when he came into the league, I was a huge Josh Allen guy, was never a fan of Baker Mayfield. I didn't think he was that good. I thought he was super overrated and he would be an average quarterback at best in the NFL. You know, if you watch his college film, he had guys running wide open all over the field. I was never a fan of Baker Mayfield. Once he got to the league, I hated his attitude even more, and I just wouldn't do it. I would not do. Now, that's a team that if I had a chance to replace Baker Mayfield with Jimmy Garoppolo, I would do that. I don't that's how low I think of Baker Mayfield. Like I do not like Baker Mayfield whatsoever. I don't think he's very good at all. He has some decent traits, but nothing is elite. And I just don't think he's mature. I don't want him leading my franchise. And I think he's a liability, frankly. So, no, absolutely not. That is the biggest mistake you could make. Draft another guy, bring in a bridge guy. Maybe he can just stay your bridge guy. I'm fine with that. Do not give him the bag. Absolutely not. That's a mistake.
And I'm surprised a lot of people are not talking about Baker Mayfield was the first overall pick in the draft. First overall pick in the draft. And what has Baker Mayfield done? Now Baker Mayfield has, had some has had some good seasons, right? But nothing first overall worthy. I wouldn't say anything that any of Baker Mayfield's season was worth the first overall pick. Like no. And if you look at guys like Lamar and Josh Allen, both of those guys are better than Baker Mayfield. Both of the guys are, you could say, 5 times better than Baker Mayfield, right? And Baker Mayfield, a lot of people are like, all right, if the Browns move on from Baker Mayfield, where will Baker Mayfield go, right? Like, but if you look at what the Browns came in with at the beginning of the season, the Browns coming into the season had OBJ, Jarvis Landry, they had Austin Hooper and David Njoku, they had Kareem Hunt, they had Nick Chubb, and they had probably one of the top 5 best offensive lines in football, and Baker Mayfield still can't perform? Like, what's better than that? Like, please tell me what's better than that. And you're not, if I'm Baker Mayfield, like, you're not going to find a better position. You're not going to find a better team with better weapons than the Browns, because obviously you look at some of the teams that have weapons, like the Rams, their quarterback is Stafford. You look at the Chiefs, their quarterback is Mahomes. You look at the Bills, their quarterback is Josh Allen. I wouldn't replace you for any of those guys, right? So if you
No.
look at the situations that Baker's in a great situation. He still can't perform. He has a top offensive line. He has 2 amazing running backs. He had weapons coming into the year, and OBJ and Jarvis Landry, and he couldn't get them the football. Like, what's the better situation for Baker? And if I'm the Browns and Baker Mayfield still can't perform when I pretty much given him everything I could to make him succeed, and he still can't perform, no, you move on from Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is not first overall pick worthy. He hasn't shown you anything. He's had some good moments, but he hasn't showed you anything that he was worth the first overall pick. He hasn't shown you that. He hasn't shown you that he was worth the first round. He was worth the first overall pick. So If I'm the Browns, I'm moving on from Baker Mayfield. Like simple as that. Baker May you draft someone else. You just don't keep Baker Mayfield on this team. It just doesn't make sense. He's not that good. He's not first overall pick worthy. And when you look at the division, like I made the argument with Carson Wentz, you look at the division and Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Herbert, Burrow, Lamar. Baker Mayfield isn't better than those guys. And Baker Mayfield, if they see those guys in the playoffs, Baker Mayfield could never go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Herbert. No. Now
Not a chance.
we've seen him obviously had that game this year with like it was like a tight game, 40 it was like 47-42, but in a playoff game and if they had to go toe to toe, and I just don't see it. If there was a playoff game and Baker Mayfield had to go toe to toe with Josh Allen, I'm taking the Bills
Zero
any
chance.
week, right? Zero chance, exactly. So if I'm the Browns, Baker Mayfield has one more year on his contract. I'll let him play that year because you don't have necessarily you don't have enough. I don't know if the Browns have first round pick, but I don't know.
Well, it's a fifth. What? It's the 5th-year option this year,
It's the
so that
option this year, and
means
then after that, he has to
yeah,
go.
his whole contract's guaranteed. So
Yeah.
you have to play him this year. But outside of that, he's
Yep.
gone. He can leave after this year, for sure.
Yep. And even his stats this year, like what, 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Like
Terrible. The guy's
that's
terrible.
not impressive. Like, and most people's arguments are like, he played through injury, but like even his attitude, like you said, even his attitude. There was like one press conference where they were booing him when they were playing the Lions, and he was playing horrible against the Lions like that first half. And then he said something like, "Oh, those are the same fans that boo us on offense." I'm like, dude, no, they're booing you because you play bad. And instead of being like, all right, instead of being like, yo, I played bad and I didn't play well, you're like, oh, they're the same fans that boo us on offense, right? Like they're not gonna boo you if you're putting up 30 points or 40 points on offense. No, they're booing you for a certain reason because you're not playing well, you're not performing on the field. That's why they're booing you. They're not booing you because they want to. No, because you're just not performing, right? So
He's super emotional.
yeah, man. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but like pre-draft, Colin Cowherd was comparing him to Johnny Manziel. He's like Johnny Manziel 2.0, Johnny Manziel 2.0, and I remember there was like an interview that he had with Baker, and he was like, Baker, I never said you were Johnny Manziel 2.0. I think you're gonna have a great career. He started like lying to Baker Mayfield in his face. You gotta check out that interview. It is really
I've
funny.
seen it.
But
I've seen it. Yeah.
yeah, but if I'm the Browns, I'm moving on from Baker Mayfield. I don't think he's a long-term option for the Browns.
100% agree.
Now, rookies. Once again, obviously, you talked about Baker, and his class was in 2018 class, and they all had 5 quarterbacks coming off the board: and Rosen, Allen, Lamar, Baker, and then I forgot who else, right? Baker and Darnold. But then obviously, look at the 2021 class with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields. And let's also put Davis Mills in that category because I feel
Yeah.
like Davis Mills had some bad games, right? Like you look at some of his games, he had some bad games, right? In Buffalo, he threw 4 interceptions. But Davis Mills wasn't bad this year. Like he's been pretty solid for the Texans. And if I'm the Texans, I think I found my long-term option if I'm the Texans because you just got to have get some pieces around Davis Mills. And who knows with Deshaun Watson, his allegations. I don't think, and he also doesn't want to play for the Texans. But I feel like with Davis Mills has been pretty solid for you this year. You just got to improve his offensive line, get him some more weapons, and I think you should be fine. I think you found your long-term quarterback. But who would you rank out of this class from best to worst quarterbacks this year?
I got to be honest. I mean, I haven't really put any thought into any of these guys. Like the 49ers don't need a quarterback. I haven't. I mean, I've watched a little bit of film on them, but not enough to form a huge opinion. The only guy after watching that is intriguing to me whatsoever that I think could have the potential to do something at this next level, I could see a couple of these guys being okay, right? Like average starters or below average starters, having long careers. But a guy that could actually be a difference maker, the only guy is Malik Willis. Like he's the only guy. And just because athletically he brings something special to the table. And maybe I'm a little bit biased because, I've had Coach McAvoy on and Malik Willis does work with Trey and Quincy Avery and all those guys. So maybe that's my bias, but and even he has a lot of holes in his game. This guy barely throws down the middle of the field at all. And he is not polished. He needs to sit for minimum 1 year for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
out of all of the guys, he's the only one that I would say in 5 years, I could see the potential of him being special. The rest of them, could they have long careers? Sure. But there's nobody that I look at and go, "Oh my gosh, we gotta go get that guy."
Yeah.
If it's me and I'm any one of these teams, I'm not drafting any of these quarterbacks round 1. I'll take Malik Willis round 2 if he's there, take my chance on him, sit him for 2 years and hope that he pans out. Like, that's what I'm doing with these guys. But, if Trey Lance was in this rookie class,
He'd be the first overall pick.
by far and away the best quarterback. It wouldn't
Yep.
even be close.
If he had
And
another year
yes,
in
he would be the
college,
first overall pick. Oh,
please, like, come on,
dude.
easily the first overall pick. But this is not the 2022 class. I was talking about the 2021 with Wilson, Trevor Lawrence. I was saying rank them from best to worst. But
Oh, okay. My fault. My fault. Okay. I misunderstood.
But speaking of the 2022 class, yes, I agree with you. Malik Willis is the only guy that I feel like has superstar potential. Otherwise, all these guys, I feel like, all right, Kenny Pickett, all right, depending on which situation he goes, he could, he could work for a certain team. He could be serviceable. But the only guy that I feel like has superstar potential is Malik Willis, right? Depending on where he goes, right? If he goes to a bad team, like if he goes to a really bad team, and if he has to either play right away, or even if he sits 1 year, if it doesn't go in the right situation, I think it goes seriously wrong. But if he goes to a team like Pittsburgh or a team like the Washington Commanders, and he sits a year and he gets to learn and develop, and then you play him next year, yes, that's the only guy in this draft that I'd be like, all right, he has superstar potential. And like you said, I could see 5 years down the road that he's tearing up the league and putting up 30 touchdowns, 30 touchdown seasons, just being a superstar. But outside of that, there's no quarterback in this draft that I'd be like,
So
all right.
so do you want me to rank them going into this next year or just
Just
career?
from what you saw this year, best or worst, who would you say was the best quarterbacks you saw this year and worst? Just in a
I
list.
mean, yeah, I honestly don't know if I saw enough to really change my pre-draft list. Out of the guys that went early, I still think it's Lawrence, then it's Lance. And to me, like, they're here, and then there's like a gap, a big gap. And out of the next group, I'm gonna go Fields, I'm gonna go Wilson, I'm gonna go Mack, and then Davis Mills. I'm still intrigued by Kyle Trask, by the way. Going into that draft last year, I had Lawrence, Lance, Trask, and people were like, "Oh God, Kyle Trask." I still believe in that kid. I think he can be a good quarterback. Now, will he ever pan out, or will it ever turn out to be that way? I don't know, but I'm still intrigued. We haven't seen him play, so I can't now come out and say, "Well, based off of what we've seen." Well, we haven't seen him play, so I
I
can't
mean,
rank him at this point.
yeah, I've seen preseason tape on him, and obviously, if you saw preseason tape on him,
Mhm.
he didn't look the best in preseason. I remember one
Yeah,
game he had like 4 interceptions, but at the end of the day, it's preseason, right? Like we've seen players even this draft, right? Like Jamar Chase struggle in preseason and drop footballs. I remember when I was watching your show one
yeah.
day, and Rad was like, "All right, Jamar Chase is dropping footballs." You guys were all concerned, and then what happened to Jamar Chase this year? He exploded. He was great this year,
Well,
right?
he literally said that he was having trouble catching it because there wasn't white on the football. Like that's something he said. So, yeah, it was concerning. And Patrick Mahomes, his first preseason, he
Yeah,
didn't look great. Aaron Rod, I mean, preseason doesn't mean anything.
yeah.
It's a place to make mistakes. Kyle Trask did just get to sit a year behind the GOAT. And do they turn the team over to him? I don't know. What does that mean? I'm not sure, but I genuinely do think that Kyle Trask can be a player in this league. I really do. And
Yeah,
watching the rest of the rookie quarterbacks, not like I saw anybody and was like, oh man, I was way off on Trask. Like, these guys are clearly going to be better. No, I don't see that at all. Like, outside of Lawrence and outside of Lance, who I had ranked ahead of him initially, anyways, I didn't see anything special from any of the other guys to say, oh, they're clearing away would be better than what Trask would be. Now, again, I could be way wrong on Trask for sure, because he may never ever get a chance. Maybe he just isn't that good. I don't know. But for right now, because he hasn't played, I can't really
yeah,
say much about him.
yeah. But if I had to rank just specifically this year, who I would say probably was the best to worst, I would say best. I would say is Mac Jones, right? Because obviously, look at what Mac Jones did this year. Now, I would say Mac Jones. He's smart, right? He's a smart quarterback, makes good decisions with the football. But if he was, I said this during the season, if Mac Jones was on the Jacksonville Jaguars, people would be calling him a bust. If Mac Jones was on the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Jets, people will be calling Mac Jones a bust. Only reason Mac Jones is people have been praising Mac Jones is because he went to a good spot in the New England Patriots that knows how to use Mac Jones and knows how to utilize Mac Jones. That's the only reason people are talking about and giving Mac Jones high praise. Otherwise, if Mac Jones was on the Jaguars or the Jets, we wouldn't be talking about Mac Jones like the way we're talking about him now. Second, I would say Fields, right? Because Fields obviously offensive line was garbage, but there were some throws that I saw Fields make, and I'm like, all right, that's special, right? Like there was one throw where he made, I think, against the Niners, where he was like running, he was on the run, he threw it to his tight end, and he made a great throw there. But there's throws that Justin Fields makes, so I'm like, all right, that's impressive. So I would say Justin Fields second, and then third I would put Davis Mills, because Davis Mills, what he did in that situation, he put a better stats than Baker Mayfield this year, which is kind of funny and kind of embarrassing for Baker, if I was Baker Mayfield. But he put a better stats than Baker Mayfield this year. With the worst situation, right? Like coming into the season, we were calling the Texans the worst team in football. Like the worst team in football, 31st worst team ranked team in football. And what he did this year, now he wasn't great, right? But in that certain situation that he's in, I would say he was pretty solid. And then fourth, I would obviously put Trevor Lawrence. You can't blame him. His situation is garbage. His coach is Urban Meyer, who's also garbage. So Trevor Lawrence is fourth. Fifth, it's Zach Wilson. And then sixth is Trey Lance in the sense. I would say sixth is Trey Lance because we just haven't seen enough tape from Trey Lance for me to be like, all right, Trey Lance is better than this guy or that guy, because he's only played 2 games. Where if you look at Wilson, you look at Lawrence, you look at Mac Jones, you look at Fields, they've played, 5, 6 games at least 5 games minimum this year, where Trey Lance has only played 2. So I don't know with Trey Lance, but I would say Trey Lance has a lot of potential, right? And I think he's going to be great next year, especially considering that the situation that he's in. Now, there obviously are going to be bumps for Trey Lance next year, but Trey Lance has potential to be a great quarterback and a top 10 quarterback in this league. Trey Lance has that potential, and he has the potential to just be great for the 49ers because of the situation that he's in. And you look at most rookie quarterbacks, especially in the first round, where the Niners selected Trey Lance with the 3rd overall pick, most rookie quarterbacks, they get drafted in bad situations. You look at Sam Darnold, who was also, I think, he was drafted 3rd overall. He went to the Jets. He was bad there, right? You look at the Niners just went to the NFC Championship game, right? Trey Lance isn't in a bad situation. He's in a situation where they have Kyle Shanahan, they have Anthony Lynn, they have Deebo Samuel, they have Brandon Ayuk, they have George Kittle. So they have guys in San Francisco. So Trey Lance is in a position to succeed, and I think he will do that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going strictly just based off of what I saw this year, and that's the only criteria, I'd actually have Davis Mills ahead of I'd have Mac Jones then Davis Mills, because Fields to me, he had the game against San Francisco, and I think that looms large because obviously we watched every snap of that game. Every concern I had about Fields going into the season or going into his career, he showed during the season to me. That looks like we lost Amin, but Fields showed me nothing that I didn't expect from Fields. I still think that he holds on to the ball too long. I think he can make all the throws, first of all. I think he's a smart quarterback, can make all the throws, is athletic, all of those things. But to me, Fields still has issues. I think he makes boneheaded throws from time to time. I think he holds onto the ball too long. And, I think that there were issues like that in college. He held the ball longer than anybody, if I remember correctly, or he was right up there. That is going to be an issue in the NFL. And so for me, I don't know. Fields didn't show a lot to me that changes what my opinion of him was. And if I go based off of this year alone, then I would go. It would probably have to be Mac, and then it would be Davis Mills.
Well, I mean, coming into the pre-draft, I wasn't high on Fields like most others. I thought Trey Lance was better than Fields, mainly for the same concerns also,
Facts.
because I remember watching Fields tape, because last year, obviously, the Niners traded up to 3, so, right? So we were focusing on all the quarterbacks in that draft. We're like, all right, is it going to be Fields? Is it going to be Lance? Who is it going to be? And I remember watching tape. Fields had a great offensive line, and pretty much all Fields would do was stand back in the pocket, hold the ball, and then he would throw it, right? It wasn't like, all right, Fields has to make quick decisions. He has to, no. He had a great offensive line. He would stand back in the pocket. He would throw the football to Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. He had great receivers. Where obviously with the Bears, he just doesn't have the greatest offensive line. So
Yeah, absolutely. He's he can be fine. I don't have any issues with Fields. I mean, I'm sure he can be fine. I would still take his upside over some of these guys, but for me, I had concerns about him going into the draft. Those concerns showed through. And again, I don't want to write anybody off, especially a rookie. I mean, to me, you give all players 3 years. They have 3 years to figure it out. If at the end of year 3 they haven't shown you what you want to see, then I can agree and say, "Hey, this player's a bust." So I'm not going to call any of these guys busts yet or anything like that. I just have preferences, and my preference still is Trey Lance over most of those guys, other than probably a Trevor Lawrence.
yeah, well, I got disconnected, so I don't know what you just said, but
It's
um,
fine. Just keep
well,
going.
moving on to the last topic: should the Niners re-sign Jaquiski Tart?
Man, this is a topic of contention. I mean, let me tell you, because there are articles being written about how he's the most important player to bring back. Um, I think it comes down to cost, really. Is he going to cost the 49ers a ton? If they can get him anything close to what they were able to bring him in for this year, which was less than $1 million, you got to bring him back. He's a good player. But to me, if I'm going to splurge on anybody, it would be his replacement. It's a guy that I can interchange with Ward. It's a guy that can play man to man on tight ends and running backs, maybe even roll down to nickel corner from time to time, just like Ward can. And it's a guy that I think can cover the back end better than even Jimmy Ward, who does a fantastic job. If I'm splurging on anybody, it's going to be for his replacement,
Tyrone
and it's going
Matthew.
to be Honey Badger. It's
Yep.
going to be Honey Badger. So that, for me, like if the option is to splurge on Honey Badger or bring in Tart, then I'm going my route. But realistically, is that somebody that they should keep if they can get him for a couple million? Yes, absolutely. You do it because he's a good player and that cheap. I mean, you're not going to find a better replacement. So I think it just
Yep.
depends on the route that they want to go.
Yeah, if you get him for cheap, I would bring him back, right? But if you have to
For sure.
splurge on him, what, $5, $6, $7 million,
No, not a chance. Not a chance.
or
No.
not a chance, right? Because the way I look at it is obviously there's play people that have high praise for Jaquiski Tart, and obviously people look at that dropped interception. But what I look at with Tart is like, yeah, when he plays, he's great, right? And he's a good, solid player. But how reliable is Tart? Like Tart, how many games does he play pretty much every season? What, he misses 7 or 8 games pretty much every year, right? Like Tart isn't a guy that plays 17 games a year. Like Tart misses pretty much at least 3 games, if not more, pretty much every season. But if you can get him back at the right price, I wouldn't be against bringing him back. I would definitely bring him back if you can bring him back for a cheap price and you can bring him back for what, like Swan Song said, for like $2-3 million. I wouldn't be against bringing back Tart. Loads of Truth 05 said, Jesse, how much do you think Tyron Matthew will demand on the open market? Easily 100 million, I would say, or like probably more, maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, 4 year, let's see, 30. I don't know. I would say 4 year 60, 5 year 75. I think that's about what he'll probably get. That would be my guess.
I mean, if you are signing to a 4 year, if you're
You
signing to
think
like a
100
five
mil?
year, huh?
I know, but 5 year 75, that's 15 million a year. You really think he can get 20 mil a year in the open market?
Yup, dude. There's
That's a
team
lot
Tyron
of cheddar.
Matthews.
I'm not paying him 20 million.
I'm not saying that I would either, but I think it's not something that I would say that it's not gonna happen or it's not possible because Tyron Matthew is Tyron Matthew, right? And there are other guys, right, in the free agent market, right? Like let's what's that guy on the Saints? What can't remember his
Williams?
name. Yeah, Williams, right? Williams, but I think Honey Badger, if on a 5 year deal, I think he could possibly get $100 million. Now, there might not be people that agree with me, but I don't think it's out of the question. I think teams are willing to spend $100 million on Honey Badger.
Okay. I mean, if that's the case, I'm definitely not doing it. But if I can get him for 15 a year, yeah, I'm 15, 16. Yes, absolutely.
M says, Jesse, are you worried about Bobby Turner leaving? Do you think production could fall off of
Rewind,
how?
rewind about 2 or 3 topics. We talked about this,
Yeah,
brother.
we talked about Bobby Turner. We basically we're just glad Anthony Lynn's here, right? Because obviously Bobby Turner, he's gone, which is a huge loss, right? Because Bobby Turner, what he did for this, well, he was probably the second best position coach on the 49ers outside of Chris Kasarik. And like you said
Yeah.
in the beginning of the show, we're talking about, all right, if the Niners have Chris Kasarik and Bobby Turner, we're fine, right? If we don't have, if one of those guys goes, right, it's definitely gonna be concerning. But Bobby Turner's old. He's bound to either retire either this year or leave probably next year. But at least I'm glad we still have Chris Kasarik. We brought in Anthony in, who was obviously a running back coach. So I think we'll be fine. Now, do I think it will be as good? Do I think the running back group will be as good or better with under Anthony Lynn? I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't count that out. But Bobby Turner, losing Bobby Turner is definitely still a loss for the 49ers.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. No, and you're all good. I know you just got off work or just tuned in or whatever. I just figured I'd let you go back and watch the show. We definitely did tackle the conversation, and Amin recapped it very beautifully just now.
Yep. Well, we're about to end the show, but 1895 said if we draft Hart replacement, who should we target?
Well, based off of who I've seen, Nick Cross would be a great option. There are a couple other guys. I just watched film on Petrie and did a write up for him for All 49ers SI. Man, I am perplexed by that guy. I have never gone into a film review. You Smoke Monday's another name. I've never gone into a film review and left with more questions than what I had going in. Like it's the strangest thing. Watching that guy was so confusing. So I don't know. A lot of people like Petrie. I'm worried. I have concerns about Petrie, but hell of a football player. I just don't know if he can play safety in the NFL. I really don't. So for me, Cross would be the guy. Smoke Monday, I'd be fine with, but we'll see. There's other guys. I got to go watch more film on some of these guys.
Yeah, David McNew says, who do you think? What do you
No,
two think of Hufanga starting in place of Tart? Tart,
no,
okay.
no, no, no.
Hufanga is Hufanga can make plays. He's a good tackler, but he's just not good in coverage, right? And for if
Mhm.
you have to be good in coverage if you're a safety, right? Like you just have to, right? And Hufanga's very bad at coverage. Like he's not good at coverage. Now, he is a talented player, right? But is he
Yes,
good at coverage? No, he's not. He's just not. We've seen this year, right? One play where he allowed that touchdown at Thielen where he wasn't even in the right spot, and Thielen caught that touchdown. Like he's not that great in coverage, and we saw that this year, right? So I wouldn't say Ufanga should start in place for Tart because you have to be good at coverage if you are a safety, and Ufanga is just not good at coverage.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Funga, decent player, good special teamer for sure. As your third safety option to play alongside with a Tart and a Ward, yeah, I'm all about it. Petrie to me is interesting. And Swan Song says I think he's more considered a nickel corner. I disagree. I mean, he's built like a corner, but they had him playing what's called a star role. Now, this became big on that LSU team, the one that won the national championship. It's actually more of a hybrid between outside linebacker and safety and what you're asked to do. And it's a lot like I could see Hafunga actually excelling in that role, right? He kind of did that low key for the 49ers this year.
Mm-hmm.
So Petrie is probably a better version of Hafunga, but I still have my questions. This guy was never one of the deep safeties, whether it was one deep or two. I know that 10 yards and in, he wipes away basically any pass thrown his way, but he never dropped further than 10 yards unless he had a boundary of an end zone there to protect him. So I just have a lot of questions. I'm not saying he can't do it at the next level. I just think there are questions. And I actually look at what Petrie brings to the table and know that he would be a better version of Hafunga. But we just got done saying that Hafunga should not be your starting safety. And that's the question that I have about Petrie. Can he be that guy?
Yep. M says nice hat, jealous. I mean, Jesse has a rotation pass, man. He has all every time I see him, he's wearing a different hat. Whether it might be obviously wears that hat, he has the 2019 Kyle Shanahan Super Bowl run hat. He has a bunch of hats, man. But yep, I think Hufanga would be better as linebacker. I mean, Hufanga. If I was the Niners, I wouldn't be against putting him and trying out for linebacker. I think he would be a better linebacker than he would be a safety for the Niners.
Yeah, probably a little bit undersized, but yeah, for sure he has the instincts and the want to, the physicality for sure, the mentality.
Yep. Well, we've gone on for 55 minutes, close to an hour. I appreciate you for joining me, Jesse. If you
Yes,
haven't
sir.
already subscribed to Jesse's channel, Last Second Sports, please go do that. The link is in the description. If you're not already following Jesse on Twitter, go follow him on Twitter. Both the links are in the description for his YouTube and his Twitter. Go get Jesse to 4,000 subscribers. He's on what, like, he's there. He's like 3.9 something K.
We're close. We're like 80 away. Make it happen. Come
Yeah,
on.
get him to 4,000 subscribers. I remember, obviously, if people don't know what happened to your channel, he got his channel taken away, and then he got it back, and it's already grown way bigger than the other channel, right? So go get Jesse to 4,000 subscribers if you haven't already. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please go do so. We're like 20 subscribers away from 600. So
Okay, let's do
subscribe to
that.
the channel if you haven't already. I appreciate you for joining me, Jesse, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.